So would you please give a warm Galway welcome to Michael D. Higgins.
Well, gur mí mágad ha seach an fircin fóilse sin agus in our areas privilege the and sharks chun teaspóntas John Behan a oscail go hifiúil. Privilege in our area mar is anúirt an scoth agus camála sin duine a bhí anna lách le cólódar in na hálíonna fud oníleón seo le piasa fada. May I say first of all what it's a very great pleasure to be associated with the opening exhibition of John Behan, as I've just said, is an artist that has been so generous with other artists, but also very much I do congratulate Tom and the Kenny family for their long-standing support for the arts in its different forms. 80 years is 8 decades is a long time, but it is, I'm delighted it's Gwyn Gográgus Banach ar idas den blianta tóla tío, agus níl ein hefris ar amach go leanhígan Áras sin. I know that heritage will continue. I also owe a special debt to Sabina and I are associated with John Behan's installation in the grounds of Áras and Uachtaráin. There are a number of new public sculptures there now for people to visit, including, for example, the Acorn, which was a commissioned piece for 1916. There's a piece there, the birch trees, which are sown in relation to the signatories of the Declaration of Independence. And then there is a very special one for which we owe John a great debt, and that is a tribute to Sean O'Casey and Plough the Stars, and so on, which we so Mila Buicas Shin. But I think it's very appropriate then that this exhibition is taking place here in Kenny's Bookshop Art Galleries. It's a collaboration, as Tom says. It's one of the advantages, if there are advantages of advancing years, that I can remember most of those early exhibitions and been associated with them. It's also a very great pleasure to see so many friends here and so many people that I know are associated with the arts. Galway's reputation in relation to the arts didn't fall from the skies. It was brought about by many people living in the most precarious circumstances, but I had a powerful belief in the arts in its different forms, and I look forward at the end of the week to coming back and being part of the launch of 2020. John Behan's career, as I've said, is a very long and distinguished one, and I think the different themes that have informed his work, Irish mythology, social history, and indeed very, very much the Gorta Mór. But I think what is most important now is the whole new dimension to his work in his deepening of the theme of migration. I've visited John's installation in Athens, and I think it's a very moving time. It would be very irresponsible of me not to say that migration is the great debate in the world, and it's one of the great failures of the European Union that we now have off one of the islands of Greece a sea barrier to stop people who are fleeing from different circumstances. And also what is worse than that is that we have a logic occasionally surfacing from those who speak of protecting Europe from those who are seeking to escape from conflict and escape from deprivation. I think this collection, I look forward to in a while about seeing the pieces, but they record movements of people ranging from famine ships to contemporary refugees, as I've said, from Africa, and victims attempting to cross from Mexico into the United States. What I think is the credit of John Behan is that, of course, his work is in practically all the major collections around the world, and indeed we have his work in Áras and Uachtaráin, and I have described the Star Plough, which is the latest which we've installed on the grounds of Áras and Uachtaráin, very much under the initiative of Sabina, I have to say. I think that we have had the advantage, Sabina and I have known John for quite a long while. And from the time of the foundry on, we in Galway, when we were living in Galway then, in many cases, the arrival in Galway of people like Brian Burke and John Behan and all of the others was a great boost. I would say that it became a kind of a leaven in the artistic bread of that is Galway. I think the many awards that he has received are obvious. When he became a member of the RHA in 1990. He's a member of Áras, which is the greatest tribute because it is a tribute that is accorded to you on the judgment of your peers. But what was very exciting was, way back in those years when we knew him first, was John was a founder of the new Áras group in 1962, and he went on to become a founding member of the Project Art Centre in Dublin in 1967. I think Sabina was discussing with me, they're going off to an exhibition with Michael Caine and others. And John, therefore, has been so it's a contribution that has been long-standing and always substantial. And I think, as well as that, what I think is that he has always kept a strong connection with what was happening in the public world, of the need to confront history honestly in relation to the famine, is something that, again, that happened in a setting with known reasons, sources, and consequences. And among the consequences were most serious was the enforced migrations. I think, as well, one of the things is that people, even in the throes of movement, even in forced movement, are interested in song and literature and music. And these themes make their way into the different pieces that you will see. And I think one thing that I think is very, very important is John Behan's commitment to the belief. I often think back to that simple book, but which we used to all carry around with its blue cover, The Necessity of Art, by Ernst Fischer, about the importance of art in society. So I am formally opening an exhibition of an artist of the first rank, of whom we can be proud, but also somebody who has brought into his art and into his conversations and life with us all a moral and ethical concern. Sometimes people would describe Ireland as people reference to the 70 million worldwide of people who are Irish connections, or the 47 million in the United States. What I think John has in fact actually dealt with is the wrenching that was involved, the exile, the leaving, the expressions, if you like, of grief and that were involved, and then as well as the celebratory pieces. But also he has reminded us is that we are all, in the end of the day, as I have said somewhere else, migrants in time, and thus you have the great engagement with mythology and our wrestling with Chronos. The famine ship is very significant in John's work. It occurs again and again. It's the basis of the National Famine Memorial in Morriskin in Mayo. That goes back to 1997. But I think what is most recently, I'm thinking now of the migrant boat off Sicily in 2018, which I had the pleasure of unveiling at the United Nations in New York last September. And there a bronze sculpture by John stands in the gardens of the United Nations headquarters in New York, entitled Arrival. It honours the generations of people who immigrated in search of a new life. And looking at it with our heads of state in New York, I was hoping that it would remind them of the duty to realise that humankind on the planet is not of its nature sedentary. The majority of people have always been moving. And therefore that migration and the movement of people in time and space is something that makes a moral call on all of us to be open in our categories of thinking and sensibility and sensation and experience. Last year I opened John's exhibition in Kilcock Art Gallery, County Kildare. It was reflecting a retrospective exhibition reflecting over 50 years of output. I often think as well, sometimes I used to always say, when I used to open exhibitions in Kenny's in the old days, in many cases, is that if you were doing a mixed exhibition of visual and sculpture, that people were inclined to sometimes almost leave their glasses in front of the sculptures. Poor old sculptures used to were always in danger. He had to have his eye out for it. But the point about it is that here we have, in fact, we are in fact celebrating a wonderful artist with great pieces, and I hope that you do take the time to go and relate to each of them. I had a conversation recently with John Berger's brother, about we were discussing what happens, and Benjamin's discussion about what happens when you are in front of a piece of art. Let it do what it can to you, because something special happens in relation to a person who is actually gazing at the work. I think that for me, as I finish, I want to say this, because things have changed in Greece. But once John's visit to Greece are ones of anxiety and despair, of human beings in flight, of lives in flux, of lives torn apart, and really of what Hannah Arendt reflects to us, we might call the excluded other. I remember visiting with John, and you remember when we went to greet a young man in a wheelchair and so forth. And in fact, those in charge of the station wanted me almost to move on in many cases, as if the young man, the migrant with the further difficulty being in a wheelchair, was kind of almost embarrassing a state visit. It is very, very important that we eschew that kind of indifference, which is the source of so much agony in the world. We have a responsibility to be engaged in these issues, and it is a privilege to be in the presence of an artist who is engaged. I think as well, in relation to what is happening in our world, my hope is that Europe will turn, that it will realise that most of its states are composed of people who were at one stage or another migrants or invaders or some kind of people who occupied spaces for different purposes. I think that we have an obligation to accept those who are undertaking these long and painful journeys. I think that as well, in relation to history, it is something that is very, very important, that we are migrant people ourselves. We have people who have in all these parts of the world, and I mention. And sometimes I think in many cases we should pay more attention to what is involved in the exits from assumptions in a place for one's point of origin and one's difficulties of re-entering points of destination. But the one thing I'm certain of is at the end of all my times teaching in University College Galway, times that I enjoyed so much, is that I was left with one concept that I felt had been neglected so powerfully in the social sciences. It was related to the mistaken assumption that the world is sedentary when it is in fact a world of movement. And it is that everything that is exciting, the things that are most exciting in literature and music and all of the arts have come out of a space of transience. These is people who have left where they were a point of stability and are moving and entering into a point of the unknown. And in that space of transience, what is inherited property is not important, but people are forced together in their humanness through intimacy and contact to actually ask what it is to be human. That's why artists are very, very important, to remind us of the moral point, not of our reasoning, but even more importantly, of the music of the heart. So may I congratulate you and say what a pleasure it is to be with you all as we celebrate yet another wonderful piece of exhibition of his work. Got a míle maith.